By this point, there have been numerous theories about March 7th, the bubbly, air-headed mascot of the Astral Express. Nothing is known about her past, who she is, where she came from, or even her real name, and naturally, this has caused many, myself included, to speculate about her true origins. The prevailing theory is that she has something to do with the remembrance, more specifically the Garden of Recollection, given her companion quest outright hinted at their involvement. There's also alternative theories about March being associated with the Path of Beauty and its Aeon Idrilla, given the reaction Argenti had when he first met March. But what if all these ideas had it wrong? What if all these hints and clues were meant to throw us off from figuring out the actual truth? What if instead of remembrance or beauty, March is actually associated with the enigmata? That's what we'll be discussing in this video. An alternative theory on March 7th's past and perhaps insight into her true identity. Before we get to the bottom of that though, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I have to warn you that there might be some references to the 2.2 story. It doesn't necessarily affect the ending, nor do I feel it spoils anything, but just to be safe, you should know I'll be referencing some stuff Gallagher mentions. Also, I have a video out on a few announcements that I'm making for the future of this channel, so make sure you go and check that video out because I shared a few things that might be interesting to some of you. I've previously talked about March in another video where I laid out all the possible lore that pointed to her being associated with Fuli and the Remembrance, and truth be told, I'm still leaning more towards that idea. So just think of this as an alternative take on who she might be, rather than a definitive answer to the question. March first joined the Astral Express when Welt and Himeko found her adrift in the void of space. She was encased in a block of ice that, according to Welt, was impossibly hard to remove, though miraculously, the minute she was brought aboard the Express, it began to melt. The cornerstone of her story is that March doesn't remember anything prior to being brought aboard the Astral Express. She doesn't remember who she is, where she came from, why she was drifting in space, or why she is able to utilize the 6-phase ice ability, the same material which had originally encased her. On top of that, several members of the Garden of Recollection have hinted that they were involved with her past, or is at least aware of it. In her companion quest, the messenger actively told March to stop looking into her past, and even claimed that it's for her own good. And in 2.2, Black Swan hints that she knows something as well. So why am I suddenly claiming that she isn't really related to them despite all these examples of their involvement in her life? It has to be the remembrance, right? Given they are the only one involved with March so far. Well, the first thing that kinda tipped me off was something Gallagher mentioned. In the 2.2 story, Gallagher is revealed to be a history fictionologist, a follower of the path of Enigmata and the Aeon mythos. In a passing remark, Gallagher mentions that he is a virtual character, and atop this very text is written the word fictionologist. I'm aware that some of you might immediately think that this might be him being self-aware and that he is in a game or something, much like what Aha did, but that fictionologist tag leads me to believe it's more related to his fictional existence. It'll probably make more sense when examined in tandem with the second thing he brings up. A bit later in the story, while talking to the now deceased watchmaker, Gallagher mentions that once something fictional is seen through, it ceases to exist. This might imply that the more about him you know, the less tangible he becomes, and if you knew every detail about him, he stops being fictional and just ceases to exist. This might be something inherent to all history fictionologists, and a hint at how their powers might actually work. And it does make sense if you think about the enigmata and what their path stands for. I suspect that all fictionologists may be similar in nature to the memo keepers of the garden in that they are not truly physical beings. While the memo keepers are sentient mimetic entities that do not have a physical form, the fictionologists may be similar in that they are fictional, for a lack of a better term, in nature. They are the sum of all the things that they make up about themselves. Because of this, the more you know about them, the less they exist, and what Gallagher alludes to. Sunday confirms that when it comes to Gallagher, his entire appearance is an amalgamation of many different members of the family, and when the main character first meets Mythos in the simulated universe, a similar syntax is used to describe Mythos, in that they are a combination of many different things, none of which are inherently true. Again, this is in line with the law of the enigmata and how they have been described to work, as their entire creed focuses on the obscuration of knowledge and information. But what has this got to do with March? Well, in the 2.1 special program event, there was a question that was asked about March 7th. Players were asking when March would be given the same treatment as the main character and Dan Heng, in that when will she be given alternative forms. Now the question was asked likely to figure out if we would ever get a 5-star March or a variation of her in a different form, and the response provided by the developers was kinda interesting. The answer that we were given is that in 2024, she will indeed be given additional forms, but narratively, it would not be the same as the main character who walks on different paths. Instead, the word they used is that she can gain access to other abilities by creating memories. They go on to say that she can create her own memories in different places and gaining strength through these very memories. Now on the surface, I'm sure most of us will default to thinking, well, this is surely related to the remembrance, no doubt about that, given it's related to her memories. But I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Remembrance by definition is the act of remembering something, not creating something new. You know what ties in better with creating something entirely new, even if it's memories? Fiction. So while it's described as a memory-based ability, the fact that she can create new ones and gain power from them sounds a whole lot like what Gallagher or fictionologists are able to do. Gallagher's powers come from the fact that he is fictional in essence. Not only that, since most fictionologists lose their strength the more about them you know, maybe that's the reason why they are trying to prevent March from remembering her past. The more accurate her memories become about herself, the less tangible she is, and why it might have been dangerous for her to actually remember her past. What if the garden was actually trying to protect her? What if, to ensure her safety, everything about her must be kept hidden, even to March herself? But that's not all there is to this, and another hint is actually hidden away in one of the profiles of the Astral Express navigators. You see, in the Cosmodesy event, through the navigator profile of Sam 3000, we learn of something rather interesting. It seems that Mythos was actually born within Fuli's own realm, the Eden of Blessed Insight. I don't claim to know what this exactly means, but it does seem to at least imply that remembrance and the enigmata could be inextricably linked. Enigmata is said to be the antithesis of erudition, but it might be synonymous or at least related in some way with remembrance, kind of like Mythos being the annoying little brother of Fuli. So perhaps while the followers of remembrance have been actively involved in March 7th's life so far, the truth is that she might have ties to another aeon and path altogether, one that is linked to the remembrance but not the remembrance itself. Now, why exactly the Garden of Recollection is trying to keep this from her, especially since the theory postulates she isn't one of them, is anyone's guess. Perhaps they want her memories due to her knowing something about Mythos. Maybe they owed something to the followers of Enigmata. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Regardless of their intentions, these clues might be an indication that despite all lore pointing to March being related to the remembrance, she might in actuality be from the Enigmata instead. Of course, as I've mentioned, I still somewhat lean more towards the remembrance side of things, and there are a few issues with this particular idea. First off is that lacking memories isn't something required of a fictionologist, at least as far as Gallagher is concerned, as he only needed to ensure nobody peeled back his layers. Gallagher was shown to still have intact memories of the past, particularly when it came to the Watchmaker. Aside from that, we don't really know that much about either the remembrance or the enigmata at this point in the story, or how their powers actually work. It could also be that the description of her new powers were lost in translation, and perhaps the real meaning was that if March recalls her newer memories, those of her time spent with the Astral Express, then she gains access to new powers. Though, if that were the case, then it brings up a whole new avenue of different ideas. What if her previous memories gave her too much power and that's why they needed to be removed? Maybe to the garden, she was a literal walking nuke, and the more memories she had at her disposal, the more powerful she was, and perhaps that's how remembrance emanators work. But then, despite seeing Black Swan in action, she has yet to show an ability to gain powers from memories itself. Though again, just because it's not shown doesn't mean that she can't do it. So you can kind of see that I'm kind of going back and forth about this, as lore seems to exist that might support both ideas equally. So to prevent myself from entering an infinite loop, I'm just gonna end my ramblings here. I really don't know which theory will end up being the truth, but I'm somewhat kinda leaning more towards the remembrance side of things, but it's kinda like 60-70% surety at this point. Once March's new abilities have been released, perhaps we can then get a bit more insight as to how they function and speculate more accurately about them. But until that time comes, we can only just make guesses. And as a reminder, that's all this is. A bunch of guesses. Which side of the fence do you fall on? Do you think it's remembrance, enigmata, or is it beauty? Let me know in the comments below. If you found the video entertaining, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.